O conhecimento da verdade liberta.
Olá, meus amigos, sejam todos muito bem-vindos a mais um vídeo aqui exclusivo pelo canal 4USA Florida Uncut. Lembrando a todos que esse canal somente está disponível na plataforma do Patreon. Eu sei, eu entendo, devido à situação que todos estamos enfrentando, ou pelo menos a grande maioria, nem todos podem ajudar com nada. Bom, eu infelizmente ainda fazer uploads de vídeos pelo Twitch. Vou procurar uma outra forma para que todos tenham acesso a essa informação que será mostrada aqui nessa série, ou melhor seria falar no plural, a todas as informações que serão mostradas aqui nesta série. Ontem à noite, eu comecei a ver um documentário do Stephen Quayle. Ele é evangélico, um grande autor, e ele escreve livros sobre temas interessantíssimos. Inclusive, eu já mostrei aqui algumas vezes no canal. O livro que eu tenho, que eu comprei dele, é Transhumanismo. Mas há 3 anos atrás, olha que coisa, não sabia, ele fez uma série chamada True Legends, ou seja, Lendas Verdadeiras, The Unholy Sea. The Holy Sea é o título do Papado, Unholy significa pagão. E neste DVD, isso 3 anos atrás, foi lançado em DVD, ele mostra com provas documentais e também com imagens como o Vaticano tem se apoderado das riquezas, e também riquezas materiais, e também das riquezas do conhecimento em vários países, de várias nações, explorando povos e pessoas. Eu já coloquei a primeira parte legendada, provavelmente eu farei paradas pontuais, assim que espero que todos desfrutem desta nova série que será mostrada aqui somente pelo canal 4SA Florida Uncut. Bom, permita-me então compartilhar a minha tela com vocês, para que possamos então ver esta série. Aqui está. Este é o selo do FBI, Federal Bureau Investigation, contra a pirataria. Eu já estou dando todos os créditos aqui ao Stephen Quayle e aos produtores desse excelente documentário. Como eu disse, eu conheci ontem e eu já devorei os 8 episódios. E nasceu, então, o desejo de mostrar a vocês. Estou colocando aqui a legenda, português. Vamos ver aqui o tamanho da letra, 150, cor verde, tela cheia. Vou esconder aqui. Vamos, então, ver esse documentário. Essa deve ser a produtora dele, Gen 6, que é o livro do Gênesis, capítulo 6. Né? Ele é um grande conhecedor a respeito do tema. Se você for procurar lá o que está escrito nas Sagradas Escrituras, no capítulo 6 de Gênesis, vocês verão que se trata justamente dos Nephilim, ou dos sentinelas, anjos caídos, ou dos filhos de Nefal.
Back in 2005, I was actually stationed or
já começa com esse depoimento marcante, chocante. Permita-me situá-los no porquê essa pessoa não está mostrando o rosto. Esse foi o piloto de um C-130, era militar na época, e ele estava no Catar e Afeganistão, se não me engano, e ele fez questão de não mostrar o seu rosto, porque é o tipo de informação, como se diz aqui nos Estados Unidos, classified, ou seja, é o tipo de informação que pode até levá-lo a um processo e até não perder a própria vida, porque é algo que a grande maioria do povo americano, vamos colocar aí entre 90% a 95%, desconhece. Mas vejam, ouçam e tirem as suas conclusões.
Deployed to Qatar. It was we were not alerted for anything abnormal. It was in the middle of the day. I remember coming into a base in Afghanistan called Verum. Back in those days, it was pretty austere. It was an old Russian air base that we were using. It's basically built in a bowl in the mountains where you have to stay high right up in the last minute, and then you basically come screaming back down to land. The area to the side of it was called the Valley of Death because during the Soviet days with the Mujahideen, they had fired their rockets into a lot of the helicopters, so you could see all kinds of wrecks and stuff in the valley below, which for the most part I didn't pay attention to because I was a little busy getting the airplane on the ground safely. We landed and basically was told to taxi to the very end of the tarmac. And like I said, it was middle of the day, very hot. I remember that. We opened the doors and unloaded the equipment that we had brought in. And then we were met at the aircraft by what we later on called the babysitters. But they kind of introduced themselves and said, hey, no cameras, nobody's taking pictures here. We're moving some high-value stuff. When the load got there, we were very, of course, curious to see what it was, because that's just the way you are when you're told that you're not allowed to have a camera. They say this thing had been dead for maybe a day or two, but it stunk. And when I say stunk, I've smelled dead things before, but this had more of a, I want to say a musky stink, kind of a, not really a decay, but more of a, if somebody hadn't taken a shower in like 10 years type of a musky stink is all I can tell you. And it was basically a dead guy, and this guy was extremely large. And when I say large, our pallets are basically, if I remember correctly, about 9 by 12 feet or so. This guy was laying in a fetal position on the pallet. So he
9 by 12 feet, ou seja, ele devia ter entre 3,50 a 4,50 de altura. Então, para os padrões normais, por exemplo, eu meço 1,70 m, o cara era um gigante, até para um jogador de basquetebol da NBA, cuja altura, alguns poucos, passam de 2 metros. O cara simplesmente tinha o dobro de um dos maiores jogadores em termos de tamanho da NBA. Para vocês terem uma ideia. Que também era mais ou menos a altura de Golias, o gigante Golias, o gigante filisteu.
And he filled the pallet. We estimated his size at approximately 12 to 10 feet tall. I did see his skin color. I was expecting somebody of more Arabic descent, being in Afghanistan and all. I know he was dead, but he was very pale, very white. Another thing that us and the rest of the crew did was we took our feet. He was in a fetal position, so you could take your feet and put it kind of, you can see where his feet were there, and they were wrapped up. He did not have shoes on, but he had like looked like he was wrapping them in some kind of a canvas type stuff. But we were sticking our feet up next to his feet, and his feet were extremely big. We know that the standard weight on one of those pallets is about 1,500 pounds, and I do remember that the loadmaster did the weights, and it was around 1,100-pound guy. The pallet sits on dunnage. You know what dunnage is? It's basically like railroad ties so that you can get a forklift underneath it and pick it up. So it was on dunnage, and basic dunnage is like maybe a 4x4. And then the pallet is, say, yay thick. It's actually aluminum and balsa wood. And this guy, I mean, laying down was very, very wide. I mean, and he was, like I said, he's in a fetal position, and you go up and just, you hit it. And of course he's under a tarp and all that, I understand that, but he was a dense guy. We questioned the babysitters of, hey, where'd you get this guy? And some of the Army guys there with him relayed to us that this guy had, I guess, been living up in the mountains. Basically treated him like a god. I did infer that they were making sacrifices to this guy because they said he found bones of people.
Ou seja, esse gigante, ele vivia em uma caverna, próximo a uma vila, e era adorado como uma divindade pelos moradores dessa vila, que faziam sacrifícios e ofereciam sacrifícios a esse gigante. O tinham como um verdadeiro Deus.
People, the giant supposedly, like I said, I was not there, supposedly killed the first team that they came across. He was extremely big and fast and agile for a guy that size. They set up another team, and when the second team went in there to get him, supposedly he had already started to basically eat on the team that had been killed the first time. They then grabbed a helicopter, and the helicopter brought him down where we picked him up. After we loaded the giant, it was just a standard mission back. We took him all the way back to LED in Qatar, where he was transloaded onto another airplane. I believe it was a C-17. I was done with my mission then. I got away from it. I was done. I did ask some questions.
O que o piloto estava falando foi que ele transportou esse gigante do Afeganistão para o Catar, e no Catar ele foi transportado para um outro avião de carga militar, um C-17, e aí o piloto não sabe mais o que foi feito. Bom, logicamente, não precisa ser nenhum gênio para chegar à conclusão que o governo americano, e por que não também o governo israelense, devem ter dissecado esse gigante e colhido DNA, o que me faz lembrar aqueles famosos 3 vídeos que foram feitos em um domingo, nos quais eu traduzi uma live do Steve Verum, onde ele menciona abertamente que uma startup em Israel, e não divulgada na imprensa, poucos conhecem o paradeiro, a localização, o funcionamento dessa startup, mas que está trabalhando na mistura de DNA de Nephilims com seres humanos, e que também havia uma busca para encontrar pessoas com uma marca especial em seus DNAs. Meus amigos, isso é tecnologia satânica. Eu tenho falado, frisado aqui no canal, que a tecnologia atual, que nós estamos tratando dia após dia, não é uma tecnologia humana. Inclusive, há pessoas que adoram, que já criaram um Deus tecnológico. A inteligência artificial exercerá um papel preponderante nos últimos dias, razão pela qual tudo está sendo preparado para o recebimento, manifestação ou revelação do antimessias.
Later where it might have gone, and as the grapevine goes, it was probably taken back to the United States, and the words I heard were right, Pat, but again, I don't know.
E aí está o nome desse documentário, True Legends, Lendas Verdadeiras. Esse já é o 2º episódio.
The greatest cover-up in history is the cover-up of history. Those who control the past determine the future. Secret knowledge is the most precious commodity on earth.
Olha só, o sol, o triângulo e o olho que tudo vê em um templo católico, hein? Que beleza, não é mesmo?
It's the currency of the occult and the Luciferian elite. Knowledge is power. That's not just a popular expression, it's a fact. Especially knowledge pertaining to the Watchers, their hybrid offspring, and their lost technology. We have discovered that when following the trail of the cover-up relating to the world before the flood of Noah, all roads lead to Rome. The Vatican knows all the secrets.
O Vaticano sabe todos os segredos. Famoso triângulo, né? Não pode faltar. É. Ora vem, Mashiach.
Where does the seat of ultimate temporal and spiritual power reside? Many believe it is here, in Rome, and specifically in the Vatican. Although Vatican City occupies an incredibly minuscule piece of real estate, just over 100 acres, it is an entirely independent sovereign country, complete with its own police force, military contingent, media conglomerate, central bank, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and intelligence agency. Covertly referred to as the entity, the Vatican's infamous intelligence apparatus is widely considered to be the most informed, most penetrating, and most insidious network of espionage in the world. The entity, like a spider, perches atop an incredibly subtle intelligence-gathering web, comprised of priestly confessors, holy orders, secret societies, and informants of all stripes.
Informação importante que eu já havia dado aqui no canal. O maior e melhor serviço de informação existente no mundo pertence ao Vaticano. Melhor do que a CIA, o FBI, MI5, MI6, Mossad. E não podemos também desprezar o fato de que essas agências de inteligência fornecem serviço também para o Vaticano. Mas muitas informações são coletadas, por exemplo, os famosos confessionários, onde as pessoas vão se confessar a um padre e depois aquela confissão. No passado, isso era realizado frequentemente. Aquelas confissões eram usadas contra a própria pessoa para tomar vantagens, chantagens e tirar benefícios. Esse é o Vaticano.
Healthily embedded into every echelon of society. This complex and pervasive nexus collects information from all corners of the earth, even from the most remote locations, and feeds it to the entity at the Vatican. there may be more secrets concealed in the vaults and archives beneath St. Peter's Basilica than in any of the confidential dossiers of every other nation combined. The Holy See has been in the business of intelligence gathering for a very long time. For over 1,000 years, the Church of Rome has been expanding its global reach through military conquest, religious subjugation, and political intrigue, acquiring along the way a vast repository of priceless manuscripts and remarkable artifacts from the dateless past. If knowledge is power, then the Vatican reigns supreme. So what does the Holy See know about giants? Are the bones of giants harbored within the secret passageways and catacombs under the Vatican? We have reason to believe that they are, or at least were at one time.
The popes and the agents of the Holy See have known about the giants for many centuries. In the last episode,
os papas e os agentes do Vaticano, do Papado, já sabiam dos gigantes há muito tempo. Sabe por que isso me chama a atenção? É que existem pastores que não creem. Falam que, como está escrito ali, os Sons of God, ou seja, os filhos de Deus, era descendência de Sem. Pastores que, ao ouvirem falar do livro de Enoque, sentem uma verdadeira ojeriza e até desconversam. Porque vários livros que não estão no cânon sagrado receberam a marca, né? Foram taxados de apócrifos. Inclusive, até o Samuel Benini comentou em uma das nossas lives que teve um rabino que amaldiçoou quem lesse o livro de Enoque.
In this documentary series, we presented historical evidence proving that the bones of giants were recovered in Peru.
Aí, o Stephen Quayle diz que nesse documentário eles vão mostrar provas de que ossos dos gigantes foram recuperados no Peru, Equador e Bolívia também, por conquistadores espanhóis, conforme está escrito aí na legenda, e padres católicos. Então, imaginem essas relíquias sendo vendidas no mercado negro. Logicamente, o Vaticano não as vende e as esconde do conhecimento público, mas o quanto seria pago por um osso de um gigante. Mas o Vaticano saberá utilizar ou fazer uso desses artefatos no momento certo, porque eles estão preparando essa grande mentira, juntamente com a nova era, de que nós seremos visitados por seres mais evoluídos, mais inteligentes e que ensinarão a nós humanos um outro evangelho totalmente diferente, levando as pessoas a acreditarem, a terem uma nova percepção do evangelho e de quem é o verdadeiro Messias e também o Criador. Ou seja, um novo evangelho que vai negar o poder divino e criador, e Yahweh Tzevaot, louvado seja o nome dele.
Ecuador and Bolivia by the Spanish conquistadors and Catholic priests during the conquest and conversion of the Incan Empire in the 15th and 16th centuries. Now, we're not just talking about some random fragments of bones that could have been mistaken for mastodons or giant sloths. Full skeletons and bodies of giants measuring well over 15 feet tall.
Tá aí. Esqueletos completos, corpos completos de gigantes medindo 4,5 metros de altura.
Were discovered all over the land. The Inca knew about the giants. In fact, they believed that the massive megaliths found throughout their empire were built by a race of ancient giants before they were destroyed in a great flood. They venerated the hills and the mountains of the countryside because their legends told that the bones of giants could still be found buried within them. And the legends of the Inca were more than myth. On one occasion, the Spaniards discovered that the natives had enshrined the mummified bodies of giants in a cave and were worshiping them as gods. The chroniclers of Peru recorded that the bodies and bones of giants were incinerated by the priests of the Holy See as they labored to extirpate idolatry among the natives. But the records also indicate that not all of the bones were destroyed. Many of them were confiscated and fell into the hands of the Spanish Inquisition. In other words, into the hands of the Church of Rome. What most people don't realize about the Roman Catholic Church is how intensely involved it is in both the reconnaissance and recovery of arcane relics relating to the true narrative of prehistory. So while the rest of the world is being distracted with the convenient fantasy of Darwinism and the evolution of the species, the Vatican is quietly gathering evidence that tells a very different story. For centuries, the agents of the Holy See, especially the Jesuits, have been
Jesuítas, sempre eles. É o exército do Vaticano, a inteligência do Vaticano, sempre eles. Nesse documentário também aparece a figura do Léo Leon Zagami, escritor, autor da série que eu já mostrei diversas vezes aqui para vocês, Confissões de um Illuminati. Ele vai mostrar coisas interessantíssimas.
Occupying strategic archaeological locations and seizing critical artifacts all over the earth. Oftentimes, Catholic cathedrals, churches, and monasteries are built right on top of the foundations of ancient pagan temples and secret subterranean caverns or passageways. I was informed years ago by multiple individuals within the intelligence community that when dealing with the antediluvian ruins, what's apparent on the surface is not nearly as significant as what's hidden underground. If a Catholic church is built on top of an ancient temple or some important archaeological site, then the priest can excavate undercover and extract whatever artifacts or bones might be buried there without the general public having any knowledge of their activity. Nowhere is this kind of subterfuge better illustrated than in Cusco, Peru.
Cusco was the capital and center of the Tawantinsuyo, the four regions of the vast Inca Empire, which extended from what is today Colombia all the way down the Pacific coast through Chile and Argentina. Much like Rome, Cusco was both the political and religious power axis of the empire. According to legend, it was renowned founder of the Inca Empire, Manco Cápac, who led his people through the Sacred Valley to establish the city of Cusco. The Inca called that land the home of the gods, and for good reason. Although historians almost unanimously attribute these immense megalithic constructions to the Inca themselves admitted to having no memory or record of their building. When Cusco finally fell to Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors in 1537, the temples of the Inca were razed to the ground, and Catholic cathedrals were erected in their place, right on top of their ruins. The heathen had been slain, and the pagan empire of the Inca conquered by the pious soldiers of the church. It didn't take long for the gilded throne of the Inca king to be...
E assim a Igreja Católica começou a amealhar riquezas materiais, riquezas do conhecimento, no conhecimento até então, até hoje, até os dias de hoje, desconhecido de muitos, e tornou-se em um estado poderoso. Volto a repetir, tudo isso Roma está guardando para manifestar-se no momento certo, para enganar as pessoas com esse falso Messias, com seres extraterrestres que na realidade são demônios.
Be transformed into a holy seat of papal power. Priests, nuns, and agents of the Inquisition established their convents in Cusco and began a terrifying campaign to convert the natives still living in the region. The Dominicans were especially influential in the city and built their convent of Santo Domingo right over the ruins of the most important and magnificent Inca palace, called Kudikancha, the Temple of the Sun.
Like many ancient cultures around the world, the Inca built their temples and palaces on top of pre-existing foundations left over from the age before the flood. These were considered to be sacred sites imbued with spiritual energy, where the gods of the old world could still be contacted. When the Dominicans built their convent of Santo Domingo over the ruins of the Kudikancha, they were taking possession of something far more mysterious and arcane than anything to do with the Inca.
So that's where the golden disc was located, right there on that wall.
The temple walls within the Kudikancha were constructed with the same mortalist precision that is the trademark of pre-flood Cyclopean masons all over the world.
In the Kudikancha, you also have the seamless stones here, no mortar.
Sem
The
cimento.
architectural style suggests that the same antediluvian race that built the megalithic constructions in Tiwanaku in Bolivia were also the original builders of these temple walls.
Inside of this wall, there are grampas. Grampas is a staples of plants in bronze made. We are going to see some examples of these stone pieces from the 1960s.
Are there blocks from Tiwanaku here in the temple?
Yes, the Tiwanacus arrived in Cusco in order to found it, in order to build this temple in a Tiwanaku style, like a Tiwanaku people. Now this architecture belongs to the Tiwanaku.
This is where they had copper. They had copper fittings here. This is an example. This is the Tiwanaku architecture.
This one is too,
This is Tiwanaku.
Arquitetura encontrada em Tiwanaku, na Bolívia.
This is the famous stone where they drilled it. And check this out. This is a famous stone here in Kudikancha, where
Perdão, dá esse probleminha. Tem esse probleminha aí, perde a... Sei porque os subtítulos ou a legenda desaparece. Vou colocar novamente. Esqueci de comentar isso no início. Continuando. É que eu acho que vai emendando um capítulo no outro, porque estava aqui VTS 0101, agora já está VTS 012.
The megalithic ruins within the convent of Santo Domingo display the universal signatures of a technologically superior race that was annihilated long ago in the waters of the Great Flood. However, unbeknownst to the thousands of tourists visiting the Kudikancha every year, the most amazing works of these ancient master builders are not in view of the masses, but hidden beneath the church.
Esse é o tipo de conhecimento, meus amigos, que a maçonaria, a Cabalá, as seitas secretas estão procurando. Eles não estão preocupados com dinheiro, eles estão em busca ou à procura desse tipo de conhecimento. Principalmente a Cabalá, que tem explorado esse ramo, que tem procurado conhecer isso, como essas coisas aconteceram, como foram feitas. Esse tipo de conhecimento jamais será mostrado em uma aula de história do mundo, geografia, arqueologia, geografia. Jamais. Em nenhuma faculdade, universidade, escola. E como, usando de um clichê, conhecimento sim é poder, porque quanto mais a pessoa conhece, então ela entende mais a palavra do Altíssimo e se liberta das amarras deste mundo.
There is an ancient legend that tells of a secret subterranean world connected by an enormous network of tunnels extending for hundreds of miles beneath the Andes Mountains and the Amazon jungle in South America. The nerve center, where all these tunnels converge, is said to be located underneath the city of Cusco in Peru, the very place known as the navel of the world. The natives called this underground labyrinth beneath Cusco the Shinkana, which is a Quechuan word meaning the place where one gets lost. And for good reason, because few of those who have entered into it have ever come out. The Shinkana is comprised of naturally occurring deep subterranean caverns that are joined together by large artificially constructed tunnels, which are supported in some places by trapezoidal megalithic stone walls and ceilings, just like the doorways in the Temple of the Sun.
The Shinkana is essentially a subterranean highway that united many of the most significant antediluvian cities throughout South America with Cusco, and specifically with the megalithic fortress of Sacsayhuaman. We're talking about manufactured tunnels with cyclopean megalithic walls in some segments, running for hundreds of miles under the earth. We know, for example, that the natives told the Spaniards that Cusco was connected with Tiwanaku in Bolivia via the Shinkana, which is a distance of over 300 miles. In a sense, the Shinkana is the antediluvian equivalent of what we call today DUMBs, deep underground military bases.
What's important to understand about this ancient subterranean highway is how massive of an undertaking it would have been to accurately chart and construct it. And we're not just talking about a single tunnel. This is a complex maze of interconnecting passageways and deep caverns, which according to legend were filled with all kinds of deadly snares and misdirections, so that only its builders could navigate it successfully.
The Shinkana represents an ancient engineering achievement rivaling, if not surpassing, any other megalithic construction on the surface of the earth. There is simply no way that a Bronze Age civilization such as the Inca could have constructed it. Now, they certainly made good use of it, but they didn't build it.
By the time the Spanish conquistadors reached the shores of Peru, the Incan kings had accumulated a vast hoard of gold in Cusco from the four corners of their empire. Much of that gold was used to adorn their temples with sacred artifacts and idols. The most lavish temple of all was the Kudikancha, whose name means golden enclosure because its inner walls were covered in sheets of gold. As the Spaniards were approaching Cusco, the greatest treasures of the Inca were carried down into the Shinkana through a secret passageway beneath the Kudikancha, the entrance to which was sealed up and hidden for generations. until it was discovered by the agents of Rome.
Bom, eu vou parar aqui essa primeira 5 minutos e 5 segundos. Logicamente, vou continuar depois. Porém, meus amigos, isso é muito interessante, o saber como a Igreja Católica amealhou uma verdadeira fortuna e ainda continua nos dias de hoje, com muito engano, e preparando o maior de todos os enganos para, se possível, com o auxílio de forças espirituais do mal, enganar também aos eleitos. Eu sou o Gustavo e esse foi mais um vídeo revelador, exclusivamente aqui no canal 4 USA Florida Uncut. May Yahushua, o único, bless you and keep you today, tomorrow and forevermore. Os verei em uma próxima oportunidade. Tchau, pessoal.
Obrigado por assistir mais uma live.